you just as we go. These are mostly pre-war pictures.
That's right.
Okay.
We're recording.
Oh, you are recording. Okay. My name is Joni Blinderman. We're here at Self-Help Community Services as part of the Video History Project at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. I have the pleasure of interviewing Mrs. Esther Klein today. I don't remember the date.
Okay. It's the 29th.
The 29th of April, thank you, 1992. Mrs. Klein, if you would begin telling us a bit about your hometown, the community in which you lived, your family.
I was born in Seredna, which was Czechoslovakia at the time, and to a middle-class family, very religious. And actually the whole town was very religious. It was one of those towns where a Jewish store was not open on Saturday. And it was a very nice, quiet town. And we lived very well under the Czech government. That was very democratic, and everybody was prospering. I mean, everybody made quite a good living, and we had everything that we needed. And we had a big family. I'm not even talking about uncles, aunts, and any of these, but my father and mother, they had 11 children. I was the 10th. There were 7 daughters and 4 sons. My oldest brother got married when I was a very little girl, and he had a few children in Europe, and then he went to America. It was either 29 or 30. I don't know exactly the dates, because it really was before I could really register everything. He went to America, and he had more children there. He had 7 children in America. He lived in Chicago first, and then he moved to Los Angeles. My other brothers and sisters, every 1 year or 2 years there was another wedding, and everybody was getting married and getting into business. Or my father had a way of putting them into business. Everybody had to make a living. So even though they went to yeshivas and they learned, but my father believed in work and learning. He didn't want anybody to be dependent on anybody else. And so he was well enough off to give even his sons dowries. I mean, he would give all his daughters, of course, but even his sons got enough money to set up a business, whatever they were inclined to do. Then I don't know how far you want to go with the preliminary, but so as I say, we all prospered, everything was going well until 1940. 1940, the Hungarians came in. Hitler's pact was that he gave back the territories that were Hungarian before the First World War, were given back to the Hungarians or whoever owned whatever. And we got to be Hungarians. It's not that we all spoke Hungarian, because the territory was before my time Hungarian, and so we did speak Hungarian. But after that, the trouble started.
Going to interrupt you just for a moment. These photographs are all pre-war related.
Yes.
So if you would just hold them up and tell us a little bit about what
this here are my sisters and me on this picture, and some grandchildren of my parents.
Where was it taken?
That was taken before the house, before a business. It's a very small picture, so you don't see too much of the house, but there was, I can't actually see which sisters, but if you want to, I'll put on my glasses and I tell you which sister is on it. because I only need it for reading.
Sure.
Well, on there is my sister Piroshka and her two daughters. My sister Hannah with one child, Turner, and my sister Mala, my sister Rochel, and me.
And which one are you?
I'm on the right here, the
I
first row.
And what was the business that you're standing in front of? Do you remember?
Actually, we had grocery wholesale and grocery retail, and this is before the retail store.
Okay. That was your father's business, was that?
That's my father's business. My sisters were visiting. I mean, some of them were still home, and the others, the ones with the children, were visiting. Now, we had a lot of property other than business, and this is in the, we were picking grapes. My father had vineyards, and this we were picking grapes in the fall. That was in 35. And there is again me and my sister Rachel, Mala, Hannah, and these are two cousins.
Were the
I am on the bottom here on the right.
were the vineyards far from?
It was about
town?
we were like in the valley, and those were in the hills. We had about 1 kilometer or two to walk to the vineyards. Okay. And this one is actually when I got married. That was already in America. Me and my husband, when we got married. That actually shouldn't have been here, right?
Sorry, I didn't see.
That's later.
And this photograph?
This is my sister Helen and Piroshka. These were my next to the oldest sister and
Just turn it towards me.
yeah. Those were married during the before the war. This was before that.
And this photograph?
This is a picture of the school in that's the Czech school in Seredna, and my brother Yitzchak, my youngest brother, is right here on the top.
Do you remember what grade he was in there?
I don't remember. It doesn't have a date on it, but he was in school that time. He looks like he was about 12 years old.
Did he go to public school?
Yeah, that was public school. Actually, what we had in Europe is the public school was right near, the Czech school specifically, was not right near the yeshiva. So they would go to yeshiva for a few hours, then they would go to public school like from 9 to 2, and then after that they would go straight to yeshiva again. They would run home for lunch, it wasn't too far. And that's how they worked it there. They went, it was actually no yeshivas as we know it here, that they were together, regular secular studies and yeshiva studies. They had the school was right near, and they would go from one place to the other.
Did you do that as well, or did you?
Yes, of course less. Girls didn't get as much Hebrew education as boys. I would go after school. I would go full-time to school, and after school I would go to the Bas Medrash, and I would learn some Hebrew and religion, Bible.
Okay, let me just, this is the last photo.
Well, this is my brother, Herschel, and this is his wife. I don't have a date here, but they were married, I would say maybe in the 30s sometimes, because I was still a very young girl. I don't think that they even took me along to the wedding.
When were you born? here?
22. But there they didn't bring little children to weddings as they do here.
Okay.
Put them in here so you don't lose them. As I say, these are precious because that's the only pictures I really have.
Sure. You began to tell us about the changes that occurred in 1940.
Well, the Hungarians little by little adopted the Nuremberg laws. And so they started taking away property. First they took away businesses. So being my father was influential, he didn't lose his business right away, but a lot of small businesses lost their livelihood right away. We were about the last, but by 42, they took away our business already too. In between that, they were grabbing people from the small villages near us. We would hear, they took in this village a group of people, Jews of course. It was enough like if a Gentile didn't like you, he would go to the authorities and say, well, this guy is no good. He is a Jew and he does this or that. And it was enough for him to be deported, which meant that they put him over the Polish border. We were not that far from the Polish border. And of course, then they were on their own, and most of those people got shot, like they say near a river, Babi Yar type of thing. They would shoot them and they just went down the river. The same thing happened in about 41 or 42. I was in my sister's house in Berezna. She lived. That was not far from the border to Poland. And her husband was Polish. The Hungarian government wanted everybody to have papers that they are citizens of Hungary or Czechoslovakia, were citizens. My brother-in-law had some papers from Czechoslovakia, but his family didn't. And I was there when they were grabbing up people who were Polish citizens in Berezna. That was my first visit to my sister. And I was in the house. She went out shopping with her 2 young children. And they came, the police came, the gendarme, what they called, and they asked me, where is Mrs. Klein? Her name was Mrs. Klein by accident too. And I said she went shopping. And being I spoke very well Hungarian, they just chatted with me a little bit, but I realized that something is going on. And the neighbors came to tell me they are taking your sister's family, her mother-in-law, sister-in-law with 4 young boys. So I went out of the house and I intercepted her coming from shopping. I said, don't come home because they are looking for you. And she went straight to the train with the 2 children without any luggage. And I went back to the house and I packed some luggage for her and I brought it to the train. And then we went home to Seredna. And they were looking for her after, but we already got home. And of course, her husband wasn't home and he used to come to Seredna. He stayed in Budapest because there was no business going on anymore. And in the biggest cities, there still you could kind of get lost between the crowd. And he used to come home once in a while.
To Seredna?
To Seredna, and in very, very secretly hiding. And she had 2 children. That time she was pregnant, and then she had 2 more children. When they took us in 44, she was pregnant again. She had 4 children, and she was pregnant. So we came home, and she stayed in our house ever after that. I didn't stay home as much because the house got crowded, and it was very hard to get food because they gave us coupons for food. But they would say, you come to redeem your coupons, let's say, on Thursday. And for the Gentiles, they would say, come on Wednesday. By the time we came for food, there was nothing left. So what did people do who had from that same Gentiles, we had to buy it in black market. So I had an uncle and an aunt in Debrecen that was Mama land, what we called Hungary, like the mainland, and they had a little bit more leeway. They had food, access to food, and being my uncle and aunt didn't have children, so I was there a lot. I used to help in business, and I used to go to school there. I was learning English, and I took classes. I tried to do something there. This way it was less mouth to feed at home, and I was occupied with something. The rest of my family everybody was married. Only Rochel wasn't married, and Yitzchak, who was younger than me. Mali married, and she moved to Hungary, to Saraspatak, in about 41. And she had 2 children. In 44, when they took her actually out of the hospital. She had a baby, and there they kept somebody 2 weeks in the hospital, and they took her out of the hospital. So I was not home most of the time, but of course I heard, like for instance, at one point I came home, that was about 42, and everybody was packed. And I said, what's going on? They wanted to take everybody from Seredna. That was again, those grabbing business. And my father had some influence at that point yet. And as much as they said that Hershkovitz family can stay, and my brother, who lived about a kilometer from us, had a business in the other end of town, and he could stay, and my sister, whose married name was Klein, that was my older sister, they had a business on the other side of town, and they could have stayed on. We could have stayed on, my father and the family. My father didn't get very excited about that. He went to the post office. That's the only telephone there was available. And he stayed on the telephone. He had some friends in Budapest. And he was on the telephone all day, and they let all the people stay. In other words, he wasn't a person just for himself. He realized that they started to take somebody, sooner or later it's going to be bad news. And so the people still stayed on for another few years.
You mean just your family, or
the whole family? Everybody stayed on in Seredna.
All of your family?
My family and all the other Jews in Seredna stayed on, because he really worked. He asked for stay, and they stayed on. Yes. Now after that, as I said, they started taking away the businesses, and everybody got very poor. And they needed assistance. So again, from Budapest, there was the name of OMZSA, an organization in Budapest. There was some rich Jews, and they were giving money to give to those small towns. And my father was selected by the rabbi because, as I said, that he was dependable to give out that money. And so we had done, that my father did that. I was in Budapest at the time of this happening, and then I went back to Debrecen. In Debrecen, I stayed until the spring of 44, maybe February or January, where they started talking about all the Jews of the upper states, like the occupied territories, they called it, are going to be taken to farms. There was always a lot of camouflage. You never know where you were going. You never know what's happening. Everything was just. I don't know if you watched, last night they have the Wannsee conference, I'm 31, and they were talking about that, how they camouflaged everything, how they covered up. You never know what's going on. And being that we have Hungarian papers, we never heard anything. My uncle understood some English, and I did by that time too, and we used to secretly listen to some of the radio from London. Mm-hmm. So we got an idea that something is going on. And then in the end of March, when I heard that the territories are going to be Judenrein, they said they are going to farms to work, but I was very skeptical. And I had a very bad nightmare that I came home and I didn't find anybody home. So I went home. I packed up and I went home.
What was the distance between Debrecen?
It wasn't too far. It was about a half a day traveling by train. It's not such a big express train. And I took very little stuff with me. I just wanted to get on. But that was also the day that you had to start wearing the yellow stars. And of course, I didn't put on the yellow stars. I got into the train. A friend of mine who was not Jewish took me to the train. My uncle didn't want to show himself. It was important that who you come with. Mm-hmm. And this girl was real Hungarian, and I was talking to her, and she put me on the train. And somehow or other, I don't know for what reason, but they never asked me for identification. I just somehow blended in. And on every station, they were taking off people from the train. There was unbelievable things going on every station, and I was sitting there. And I thought, I must be invisible because nobody even asked me for identification. But it seems with my coloring and my looks, they really thought that I was Hungarian, and they didn't bother me. When I got to Ungvar, which was the big city near Seredna, one of my sisters lived there, Piroshka, and she had 4 children. And her husband was picked up from the train just 2 weeks before that. And she was very upset when she saw me. She says, "How did you dare to get on the train? How did you dare to come?" I said, "I want to go home. I didn't see my parents and my family for a few months, and I hear that they are going to take them, and wherever they take them, I want to go too." She says, "You would have been much smarter to get papers from your friend there. You had friends who were non-Jewish, and I could have gotten papers. I don't know if they wouldn't have got me later, but I could have gotten away, but I wanted to go home." And I went home with a train, and I arrived in the evening. And all the windows were shuttered with wooden shutters from outside, because by that time they used to break every window. Every Jewish house was always with broken windows. And my father had put in wooden shutters on every window. And I came in, I thought that nobody's home already. And I went to the back of the house, and I saw a little light. And then I knocked, and they finally let me in. And my father and my mother and whoever was at home were so surprised. They couldn't get over it that I got home. And of course, after that, I did put on the yellow star, because at home we couldn't have gotten away with it. See, in a small city, everybody knew everybody. You couldn't, everybody knew me by name, and I couldn't have gotten away with it. And that was before Passover. On Passover, we already saw...
This was which year now?
44. And we saw already people going from the small towns, groups being taken to the ghetto in Ungvar. And that Passover we spent crying most of the time, because we recognized people that we knew, and they were being taken. And one by one group, small children with lame grandfathers, old people, young people. It was very heartbreaking. Matter of fact, there was 2 people in Serena who kind of retarded. They were harmless, but it seems they had enough knowledge or I don't know what kind of instinct, but they ran to the woods and they hid. Do you know a whole battalion of soldiers went to look for those 2 incompetent people? I mean, what would have hurt them to leave those 2 people? They would have died in the woods anyway. It was unbelievable how they came after every person. You could not hide. There was no way of anybody being left. We were already surrounded by that time completely. The Russians were coming down on the side of the Polish side too. And so there was really no place to hide. And they took us to Ungvar, to the ghetto. The ghetto in Ungvar was a brick factory. So there was actually just a roof. Mm-hmm. Nothing else, just a roof. And we had allotted a little space there for the family. And the food was non-existent, very little. My mother baked in some jewelry into the bread. Mm-hmm. And they were cutting up all the bread before we arrived. And we had only breadcrumbs, actually, because they found the jewelry and they cut up everything that we had, the food that we brought along. It's unbelievable that even the conditions already there. It used to rain, so it rained in because there was no sights on that buildings. And we were on the floor. We brought along some blankets. Mm-hmm. And we had as much room as you could sit. We were about, how many people? My parents, my brother Yitzchak, me, and my sister Rachel, and Hannah, who had the 4 children and was pregnant at the time, and my sister Fanny, who was a Klein, she had 9 children, and she was also near us there. And I don't think we had as much room as from this wall to the other for all those people that I'm talking about. And my brother Herschel, who had 5 children, and his wife. And we were all there on that little spot. We only had room enough to sit. If somebody lay down, the other one had to get up. And the dust, there was that dusty floor. They were giving out soup. The Jewish organization in Ungvar tried to give us soup. Well, that was once a day.
Was that all the food that you
That's
had?
all the food we had already in the ghetto. Anything that we still brought along, we had a few potatoes or a few beans, so we tried to cook outside on a little fire. But it was already very miserable. All those small children, you have to realize that my sister's children were all small. Also, by that time, my other sister, who lived in Ungvar, also had 4 children and was pregnant, also came in. Her husband was taken before, as I said, off the train. My brother, Yosef, who is alive and who lives in New Jersey, came to see us. And they wouldn't let him into the ghetto, of course, to see us. He was near the gate. And somebody came to tell us, your brother is here. We were running to the gate. And my mother was also already in the early 60s. She couldn't run so fast. I was there the first one, and he handed me a little package. And the soldiers said to him, if you don't leave this minute, and he was training the gun on me, I'm going to shoot your sister right away. And it was nothing that he wouldn't have done. And I see he starts running. So he left before my mother even came to the train here. I never saw my father or mother again. And after that, they started taking transports from the ghetto.
How long did you stay in the ghetto?
About 4 or 5 weeks.
Was anyone told to work or anything like
No, no, they didn't work there because there was a big crowd. But what they did there is they took people who they thought has money, and they used to beat them actually to death to tell them where they hid their jewelry or money. And a lot of people, there was a Mr. Friedman, there was other people who actually got killed. They actually died after those beatings. My father was taken to that interrogation room just a day before they took us to Auschwitz. They used to come and call out names. You get ready for transport. So we would pack up. And that day, my father was there, and we were very worried because he was in his late 60s, and we were very worried that they are going to kill him there. We didn't know that after a few weeks we are going to get killed anyway. He was taken that day before we left, and they didn't get around to him. Mm-hmm. And the next morning we were on transport, which was the transport to Auschwitz.
Did people know where they were supposed to be going?
Nobody knew anything. They said they're taking us to farms to work. Nobody knew anything. I mean, there were rumors. We heard rumors. I heard rumors already in Debrecen when I was there. There was a woman that I started learning how to sew because I realized that somehow I'm going to have to make a living in the future. And I was going to a Gentile family. There was had to learn to sew, and the sister got married just a few weeks before that. And one day she told me that my husband, who was with a Hungarian Hakenkreuz, and she says, my husband says, I want to tell you a big secret, and I don't want you to say it to anybody. He says that trains are going to the east, and they never turn back. They coming trains with people, and they unload them there. He was one of the groups who were in the transport battalion, or whatever you would call it. And he says, I think that something is going on there because they never come back, and there is big factories there, because in Auschwitz, those big chimneys where they burned the people looked like factories. So he saw something. He didn't see what they are doing. And I came back to my aunt and uncle, and I was very upset. I said, you know what this girl told me? And she swore me to secrecy. I said, she said that something very bad is going on with the people. They are taking them to Polish border, and something is going on there, bad. And my uncle says, she must be a very big anti-Semite. She wants to scare you. We didn't believe it. I mean, how can you believe anything like that? Your mind does not accept this kind of things. It's not in your experience. You can't imagine anything like that happening. So when they put us on transports, already on the train, we didn't see too many Nazis before that. Mostly it was the Hungarian police who were guarding us. The Nazis would just come in like for the interrogation and for this kind of things. But they really did not mingle with us at all. But on the trains, the Nazis took us over. And they were already starting to beat up people as we were getting on the trains. The trains were, of course, cattle cars. And a cattle car is not that big. I don't think it's as bigger than this room. And 80 people got into each cattle car. And they gave you one pail for a toilet and one pail of water. So as soon as we got in, it was a real misery. If somebody wanted to go to the toilet, somebody would hold a blanket for privacy. Of course, soon that pail was full, and there was no place to put it. And water, one pail of water was not even for a little bit of drink. So nobody actually had anything to drink or eat. Whatever we took along, we already didn't have anything. And the children, my sister's children got sick as soon as we were already in ghetto. They had fever, they were crying all night. It was such a misery. That trip took about 3 to 4 days. They would stop once in a while and take off the pail, which was of course overflowing. Water was all over the place. And they would give us a little water which got spilled because everybody wanted water. The trip itself was such a misery that I don't know how anybody survived. The children were actually near death already in the end of that trip.
How old were your sister's children?
My sister's children, the oldest was 5 years old. So she had a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and maybe a 1.5-year-old, and she was pregnant. My other sister who was there, her oldest daughter was about 17, and then going down 19. One baby was 6 months old. She was breastfeeding, but there was nothing to give them anymore because she didn't even drink water. All the children were sick by that time, and the screaming and the crying in the train. They used to hoist me up because I was very light. There was a little bit of a opening on the top of near the roof. And I was looking when we stopped where we are, but of course there was nothing to see. They stopped in their places where they had some kind of an outpost. And finally we arrived to Auschwitz, which had a big gate with Arbeit macht frei. And again, they hoisted me up, and I saw, which I thought was factories with big chimneys. And I saw people with striped dresses and with little kerchiefs on their heads, walking in 5 in a row, like they're going to work. And I reported there are factories and people are going to work. The men had also the striped clothes, but without anything on their heads.
Did you arrive in the day or the night?
It was very early in the morning. It was actually, I would say about 5 o'clock in the morning. It was very early, but they were getting ready to go to work, these people. Actually, in Auschwitz, they used to wake you up when it was still dark. I wouldn't know the time, but it was still dark, and we had to stand for counting. So I suppose those people, too, were getting ready. They would count you every day twice. You were standing in line, and if you by any chance couldn't stand on your feet and you fell, that was the end of you. They would shoot you. So you were standing, even if you could or not. You really didn't try to. You didn't want to fall down. So that's what I was reporting, that they are going, it seems, to work, and there are those big factories, and smoke is coming out. very thick black smoke. And that's what I saw. It took all day long for them to come to us. We didn't know it at that time, but it seems that they had other transports arriving before us. And at that point, what I heard later, they used to kill about 12 to 14,000 people a day. Now our transport must have been about that much or more, because it was a long cattle train, and 80 people in each one. So by the evening, they started to unload us. The unloading was done with pushing and with dogs and with whips. They said, leave everything in the car, your luggage. We are going to bring the luggage after you. First you get a shower. In the train already, they again searched us for any kind of jewelry or money. But then we started getting off the trains, and it was quite high, because those cattle trains are about this high. And you had to jump off. And some of those children and old people couldn't jump, so they would pull them off. The most of these people who worked in those unloadings were Ukrainian or Polish non-Jews. And they were as cruel as the Nazis anytime. They would throw you down, they had whips, and they would hit you if you were not in a hurry enough, if you didn't go fast enough. And they kept on saying, fast, fast, fast. Finally we got off and we got into lines. And the minute we got off the trains, the smell hit us, which was unbelievable odor of burning flesh. It was actually choking you. We couldn't imagine what that odor could be. I had also a cousin with me, and she was older, and I used to talk to her. I didn't want to scare my parents or my sisters, and I used to say, what do you think this odor is? To me, it smells like flesh. I was very inquisitive, and I always wanted to know everything. And she says, well, so many people are coming, there must be some people who die on the way. Look how many, they took off a few bodies from our train, older people who died on the way. So she says, they have to do something. So we were marching down near the trains, and then there was that row of German officers, SS, and they were, I found out later that one of them was Mengele, and with a stick he would point to one side or the other. And all those with young children or older people went to one side, and those who they thought could be working yet went to the other side. My mother was walking with me, and she looked pretty good yet, even though she was in the early 60s. She was a very good-looking lady, and she looked pretty good yet at that point. And they sent her with us. And so was one of my sister-in-laws, who didn't have children, and my sister, and my two nieces that I said who I survived with, and one niece who was 13 years old also looked like a big girl. And we went on that side, and my cousin who was walking with me, and we started marching toward the crematoriums. The other side, we didn't know how they went or where they went. And it was already by that time quite late in the night, because the stars were out, and it was quite dark. And as we were marching, the SS was walking with us, and they were very drunk. They all smelled of liquor. And as I said, I was very inquisitive, and I saw a fire. But it was unbelievable big ditch. It was about, to me it seemed like a mile long, very big. And I always had very good eyes. They used to call me eagle eyes because I could see and recognize people from very far. And what I saw there is like two people would hold a person, because I saw limbs, and they would swing him and throw him into the fire. That's what I saw. And I said to my cousin, do you see what's going on there? There's a big fire and they're throwing people in. And she says, how do you know it's people? To me it seems like logs. I said, no, logs don't have legs and arms. It seems to me like they have limbs. And one of the SS was walking near me, and I still had nerve. I wasn't so afraid of them yet. And I said, what is that große fire? And he says to me, dort brennt man die alte Truppen. They are burning the old bodies. I was so shocked, I couldn't catch my breath. And I said to my cousin, did you hear what he said? Because she also spoke German. And she says, oh, don't you see how drunk he is? I mean, it didn't, even when you saw something, it didn't sink in. It was so unbelievable. You wanted to make some kind of an excuse for it. You didn't want to believe it. It was unbelievable what was going on. All that beatings and that with those dogs, anybody stepping out, we were not used to walking 5 in a row. And if somebody stepped out, the dog would come right after you. Well, it took us, I later read that Auschwitz territory was about 20 miles. Now it took us more than an hour, maybe 2 hours of walking. Some people already couldn't walk that much, and they would fall. So they just kicked them aside, and we heard a shot. They didn't bother picking anybody up, so we kept walking if you could or not. You wouldn't stop in a time like this, even if you have to drag yourself. And we came to a place where there was a wire fence, and there was blankets all around it. On the fence, we brought enough blankets. All around the fence, the area where we would have seen into that territory, that was put blankets on the fence. And that was very curious. We couldn't imagine what it is. That was one of the factories that we saw. It was the crematorium. One of them or two of them right there. And we heard a lot of screaming. And we were going, like this was on the right side, and we were going to the left side. And there was that building, not very tall, and they wanted us to go into that building. But when we heard all that screaming, the group started screaming too, and we didn't want to go in. So they came with the dogs and with the sticks, and they got us in there. And as we got into that very big room, some girls who spoke Slavish and Hungarian and German were standing there. Those were already our people, either Polish non-Jews or Polish Jews or Slavish Jews who came before us from Slovakia. And they were telling us, undress, leave everything on the floor. Some of us had as much as 5 dresses, one on top of each other, because we thought we cannot bring anything along. Let's at least have some clothes. Even the shoes we had to undress completely naked. That too, can you imagine girls who never even undressed before their mother? I never saw my mother naked. I mean, it was very, very not done in our house. And we had to undress naked between all those people. And they had to hit us, and until we had to take off everything. And the shoes, everything they said, grab your shoes and step, and we started going in to another room where they cut our hair. There was people cutting hair. They cut our hair to, like with a machine, you know, like men, they used to cut hair. And we went under a shower. But our showers were water. And they even gave us soap. Little did we know that that soap was made of human fat. After that, they gave us some schmatters, if you know what that is, some dresses that they had picked out, of course, everything that we left good, and they gave us some kind of only a shirt, an undershirt, and a dress. No panties, nothing. And we had to stand again in lines, 5 in a row, and get out of there. We came in coats and 5 dresses and everything, and sweaters. And here we were suddenly undressed. It was in the beginning of May. It was very cold in Auschwitz. The climate there is colder than here. And we were all undressed, and we had to stand in lines, and we were shivering. We did not find each other. We came in the group, but we did not find each other. We didn't recognize each other. Because with cut hair and with those clothes that they gave us, I was looking for my mother. I couldn't find her. I was looking for my sister or my sister. We just didn't find each other. And so we stood into the line, and slowly we started marching toward Barak, to the Lager C, which actually was a Vernichtungslager. And that's why I don't have a number. Because what they did, the Lager C was for fill-ins. You know the efficiency of the Germans. If they had, let's say, 12,000 people, and they had room for 500 more to process, what they called processing, that they would come to the sea lager, tell everybody to undress again. Every few minutes we had to undress. And they would select the older people, or anybody who was emancipated, you know, skinny, and they would take them out, and those were the fill-ins for these places that they had room for. In about 3 weeks of after arrival, my mother was selected, and I was very upset about that, and I was running after her. So they hit me over the head, and then I didn't see when she went out of the gate. The lagers, in those places that they put us, the barracks, took 1,000 women. We were separated from the men right away. There was 3-tier, we called it like Goliaths, but that was 5, 6 people were on each shelf. It was like shelves, without blankets, without anything. On these wooden shelves, there was on the 3rd row, on the 2nd, and then on the bottom. And that's how, you must have seen pictures, how that looked. And of course, we were freezing. We were freezing all through the time. We were always very cold because we had no blankets, we had nothing. We didn't have stockings. We had the shoes that they let us bring along. People who needed medicine. For instance, there was a woman right near us, and that's why I know, because we didn't even ask anybody's name. You were so upset that you didn't talk to anybody. She had diabetes from Koloshvar. She was a doctor's wife, and she brought along a lot of insulin. At that time, you couldn't get insulin. And of course, they took it away from her. And she was crying, I need my medicine, I need my medicine, I'm going to die. In a few days, she went into a coma. And one day when we were in the row standing, as I said, in the morning, they would send us out for sail appel, what they called. They would count us. It was still dark, with sticks, with beating. They would stand us outside there for hours until the sun came out. I wouldn't be surprised that it was like about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we stood till the sun would come out, and they counted us. So that woman was right, not far from me, and one day she just collapsed. She was already like in a coma, and she collapsed, and they would kick her out of the way. And my mother, that was before my mother was selected out, and she was a very religious lady, and she says, here, a dead person, and how they treat her, they are kicking her. You're not supposed to touch a dead person. You know, she had all those morals of a religious Jewish woman who, if you were dead, you were treated with respect. She was very upset about that, but little by little, she realized that that's how it was happening. In the beginning, we didn't want to eat the food because, of course, it wasn't kosher. But my mother, who was a very bright woman, she said, when you are in so much danger of your life, you have to eat whatever they give you. You don't pay attention to anything, you just eat. Of course, we couldn't really eat it. The bread was like soap. It was black pieces of hard soap. And it didn't even look like bread. But after a few days, we ate it because there was nothing else, and we didn't even get enough water. And the water, anyway, was very poisonous in Auschwitz. They had a lot of mosquitoes there, and the water was not good for you, actually, but a lot of people got diarrhea as soon as they came to Auschwitz. One of them was my sister, Rachel. She was much stronger, a bigger girl than I was, but she couldn't take it. I don't know the reason why I survived, because I really I was a small girl, but I wasn't very small either, and maybe that I wasn't missing as much as the stronger ones did. Anyway, my sister, after about 4 weeks or 5 weeks after being there, was selected. She was sick, and she looked very bad, and they took her out. And as I say, little by little, they were selecting out the people, and that's when we were very, very scared. And we decided with my 2 nieces that we are going to hold on to each other. And we never separated. If we had to go to the toilet or anything, we went, the 3 of us. Even on that shelf that we were sleeping, if we had to turn around, we wanted to turn around because one of the sides got tired of being on the wood. Everybody had to turn. Because the way we were situated, there was no room to turn around anybody in different directions like bagels. Anyway, we were in Auschwitz for 3 months. in that time, they kept on having selections. Some of the selections were for going to work. They selected from our lager for work, and those were taken to different places to work, and others were being taken to being guests.
Did you know at that time that people were being gassed?
I didn't.
Yet?
We didn't know which group is going where. We had to undress and they selected, and we didn't know where they are going. But little by little, we got a little wiser, and any time we had a little time, I went around asking questions. And I found that we were in 26, in the barrack 26. And going further down, there was 3 and 4 and 7, and somehow or other, those people looked healthier. And I found somebody that I know from before, and I asked her, what is going on here? I mean, do you have any idea? And she told me that she thinks that from her barracks, the people are going to work. And so one day, they didn't have your name or anything. You can actually move from one barrack to the other if you had anybody who let you in. And I knew that woman, and I said to the 2 girls, by that time it was only the 2 of us left, the 3 of us left. My niece, who was 13-year-old, was selected out because she was too young. My sister-in-law was taken one day to work, and as they were crossing where the train goes through, you know, what do they call that, the embankment where the train goes through, the 5 of them who were crossing at that point, the train came and they didn't stop them. And all those 5 got killed that time with the train. I mean, human life didn't mean anything by them. They couldn't even stop the train or stop the people from crossing. So she was gone, so it was only the 3 of us. And I said, you know what, let's go to number 3. I see they are taking there to work. And maybe we are going to go out on a work detail, because Auschwitz just looked so dreadful, so terrible, and the beating, and the food there. We used to get a green soup, which was made of some kind of leaves. There was more sand in it than green leaves. And it was right beautiful. It was unbelievable what we had to. But we had to eat everything because we were very hungry. So we decided maybe it's going to be better. And one day we just, as they were, after the sail appel, we just moved over to the other side, and we went to another place. And this girl who knew me led us in. And she made room for us, and we went in, and we got, because there it wasn't as crowded because they kept on taking people out to work. And we got in there, and after a few weeks, they did select us for the work detail. And we went to the train. They gave us different clothes. They gave us some food for the trip. Everybody got a bread and some, I don't know what side, maybe some margarine or some jam, and that was our food for if we didn't know how long it's going to take or where we are going. They could have just as well taken us to the gas chambers. We didn't know where we are going, but we were hoping that we are going to work. They gave us clothes, only again, just a shirt and a dress. No underwear, nothing else. And we got into trains. It was those same kind of trains that we had before, but maybe we were maybe 70 in a train, not 80, and we could sit down. And there was a little straw maybe underneath. And it was August, and it was very hot. There was only a little window on the top of the train, and people were actually fainting from the heat. There was no air. And we had to keep the bread to last us, so we would have little pieces. We didn't have a knife or anything, so we would just break off a little piece and eat some. And there was no water again. And the toilets again were those pails, and they would stop once in a while to empty. And we went. It was quite far because it took us about 3 days to get to our destination, which was Frankfurt. Not Frankfurt am Main, but Frankfurt that was near the French border. And there was some kind of a working camp. And that's where we got, they took us there. It took us about half a day to walk there from the train. It was very interesting that the people who we met, because we went through Frankfurt, through the city, they saw us and they would turn their heads. They didn't want to acknowledge that they seeing us, because they now say that they didn't know. Of course they knew, so many camps all over the place. They could have known just from the smell, from the odor of Auschwitz. It was miles that you could smell it. Now where we arrived, there was no Vernichtungslager. That was a working camp. And when we got in, we got again barracks and 3 beds, tires, but only one person slept in each bunk. And there was even a little straw underneath us. And there we started going to work. Now the work was, we were clearing airports. Like bombs would fall all over, and there would be little pieces of shrapnels, or sometimes some people picked up something and they would get killed. They got blown up, but we were expendable. They didn't need us. So we would be doing that work. We had to clear the airports. We never saw the planes. They took us there when no planes were around. And we would clear everything, and then the planes would, I suppose, come. We had to clear away the debris. And we were there. Anybody who got sick, they would take to sick rooms or infirmaries, whatever they would call. There was no selections there. But if somebody got sick or would report sick, they would take him to those infirmary. Now we didn't know it at that time, but those infirmaries were emptied all the time, and the people were taken back to Auschwitz. All those who got sick or died, or most of the time they were still alive, but they were not well. The food was not good, but it was better than Auschwitz. We did get some bread which actually looked like bread. It wasn't good, but it looked like bread. And we got some soup that would actually once in a while would even find a potato in it. And some grain. And the only very big problem was we had there a Sturmscharführer who was about 7 foot tall. I don't know because I never looked into his face. One thing I never did is look in any of their faces. And I just found out later that was one reason I stayed alive. Because if they seen you looking at them, they would select you because they didn't want any witnesses or somebody to be able to identify you. And I just, for fear, by that time I was so scared that I only saw their shoes. I never looked up at anybody. I only, if they were already turned away, would I ever look at them to know how they looked. But otherwise, I never looked up when they were around us. That Sturmscharführer was very big, and he was towering over everybody, and he had about this big boots. And if somebody would get out of line or do something, he would pull them out of the line and step on them with his big boots. Of course, all over the dread, you have no idea the fear we had, how scared we were all the time. It was like just like, it was unbelievable, the fear. We lived with such a nightmares, with such a fear all the time. Also, what he did is, for punishment, I think that there was a woman leader there too. She was an SS woman, and it seems that they must have been some kind of a girlfriend, boyfriend, I don't know. But what they used to do for punishment is, if anybody had to be punished, they took them in the basement in the evening, and they would undress the person, and they would have somebody else from the people beat them, whip them, and those two would watch. Seems they must have been some kind of sadist or something, but that was the punishment usually. And those people who were beaten, we didn't see them again. They were taken to the infirmary, and they didn't survive too long after. So we were going on with this work there.
How long were you there for?
By the time we arrived, it must have been September, because in the end of August we left Auschwitz. So it was September, October, November. In the beginning of December, it seems that the French or the American army, I don't know which one was getting too close, and they packed us up, and again we went on transport. And they took us to Ravensbrück. Again, those cattle wagons in the same business with. They took us to Ravensbrück, and in Ravensbrück there was no room anymore, because they also were taking from all over the people to Ravensbrück. So they put us up in that cell, like a bubble. You know, where they make those fabric. Like a bubble, you know, they have it here too. They have sometimes for a sport arena. They put us in that kind of a bubble, of course, no heat. The floor was bricks, and we were not dressed for anything. We had no coats or sweaters even at that point. And we were freezing. They put a little straw on the bottom for us to lay down on. And what we did with the straw is everybody put it into their clothes, a little in the back, you know, for warmth. It was just such a horrible place. The food, the only way we got any food is if we had a little dish, a little cup or something. And the snow was like knee high, and they would tell us to stay in line That was 1,600 girls in that group. And we had to stand in line, and they were giving us the Stuba was there, the helpers were Russian girls. They was big, healthy girls, and they ate up half the food before it even started being distributed. And then they would give everybody like a cup full of soup, if you ever got to that from there. But most of us never got there. So again, we were very hungry and cold. In the night, you couldn't sit on that cold floor. So we used to group up, like bunch up people, like 200, 300 in a bunch, and we would sleep like that, holding on to each other. And of course, anybody who would fall asleep would fall, but you didn't move because that way you were at least between people and you were a little warmer. We got so sick and weak there that in about a couple of weeks, half of the people died. Of the 1,600, about 800 died. And there was a typhoid sickness going around. Many times you would sit on the floor because you couldn't stand all the time, and somebody near you would put a hand or a foot on you as you were sitting. And one time somebody put a leg on me, and I said, "Your leg is so heavy. Could you please take off your leg?" And I touched her too. She was dead. People were dying like flies. At one point, nobody wanted to get up to go out for food. We just decided this is it. You never got the food anyway, because by the time you came into the road, they didn't have anything. So we didn't talk to each other. It was not a decision like we decided to stay in. Everybody for themselves decided that this is it, we finished. And we were sitting, and they came in with dogs and with sticks, and they were trying to get us off from that floor. Nobody would get up. We were beaten. The dogs were jumping on us. We had no cheshik, no way of getting up anymore. We just didn't want to get up. So they left us there in the end. They couldn't get us up. And within a few days, they finally emptied a barrack, and we got into a barrack, and they put us in quarantine because, as I said, there was the typhoid going on. And we were all sick. Now, I don't know, it was never diagnosed that if I had typhoid, but we were running to the toilet all the time. And we were very weak and very sick. And that was drawing already almost to the end of the war. We started hearing all kind of rumors. And it came to a point that we couldn't stand up. That when they called us out for sail appeal, we were like bent in half. It was no way that we could even stand up anymore. We had no strength left. But we were holding on. We were holding on and helping each other. Like if somebody, one of the three of us, we were still together, couldn't stand, that two of the others would hold you up. And that's the only way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived, none of us. But we were holding on to each other. And we were helping each other as much as we could. If we, any place, got a little piece of bread, we would, each of us would take one bite. But we would never just eat up something and not give the other one. And I think that really was, and also the sympathy, you know, somebody who loved you was there. After you lost everybody, there was somebody who really still cared. And then in Auschwitz, in Ravensbrück, suddenly we heard that they are going to transport us. They tried to take some of the ones who were a little better to work, and they walked us miles really miles to the woods there, and we were making Schutzgraben, which means where the soldiers hide, you know, those big ditches. And to give us a shovel and try to make us throw up ground from inside, that was really an impossibility because none of us had any strength left by that time. But we tried, we tried, and if you stopped a minute, the dogs would jump down on you. So we went on. I don't know what gave us the strength, but we kept on going whatever we could. Many times walking back, we were dragging each other because we really had very little strength left at that point. But that we still were very young, and it seems that the ones who really couldn't make it were the ones who were like over 25, 30. Mm-hmm. The ones, the young ones, still were going on. Even what happened, we just kept on going on. Especially if you had somebody to help you, like I had my two nieces. And finally, they told us that we are going on transport again. They did not tell us where we are going, but again, they lined us up. That was in the beginning of March, or maybe a week into March. I don't know dates, we never had a calendar, we just were kind of guessing at the time. Yes, in Ravensbrück, I met people who were being you know, putting them through all kind of tests, and they call them kralik. That is, what do they call those animals that they use for tests? You know, they like one woman I met, she had her leg broken on 17 places. One day I thought maybe I should go and get some medication. I feel so sick. And I went into road to go to the sick room. And when I got to the door, I heard the doctor talking Czech. And when I came online, I said to her, "Ja som Česká," that I'm Czech. And she says to me, "Turn around and go back as fast as your feet will carry you." I didn't ask any other questions, I went. Because some of those people that they were in line for reporting sick were the ones that they did experiments on. And so she saved my life, actually, because she heard me talking Czech, and she was a Czech doctor. Anyway, I went back, and as I said, in the beginning of March, they started to put us on transport again. This time, we got on cattle wagons, but they didn't have roofs. Just cattle wagons without any roofs. And we got on, and of course, very cold again, freezing. Food was never after that regular. We would stop in certain embankments where trains would go, and we would jump off and go scavenging, you know, for something. We would find sometimes a potato, sometimes some kind of food, and we would. At one point, I found some haferflocken, which is oatmeal, in a sack, and I took it in my dress, and I brought it back, and we were eating it raw as it was, because that's all we had. At one point, a train passed us that was carrying men, and we hollered to them, "We are very hungry, we have nothing to eat." So one of them threw in a box of sugar, and the other one a box of caraway seeds. And we were chewing on those caraway seeds for about a week, everybody getting a little bit of a caraway seeds. And sugar only to those who were fainting. And there was one young girl who kept on fainting, and we felt very bad. as much as nobody wanted to give away any food, but we felt that she might die if we don't help her. And we gave her a little sugar in her hand, just to lick a little sugar. And that's what we had. And we would, every stop, we would jump, a few of us would jump off the train, whoever still could walk, and we would go scavenging, you know, to find something. Sometimes it was fields, and we would find something there. Sometimes train stations where they were transporting things, and we would find something. But regular food, we didn't get for about 2 weeks. We were going around and around of Berlin, near Berlin, and it was already very close to the end of war, and the bombing was going on every night, even in the daytime sometimes. And we would see the bombs fall, but it were far from us. Once in a while, it would come near us. Somebody would make a mistake. And at one point, they threw in a bomb in one of the, it was really not a full bomb, just as shrapnel fell, and it cut off one of the girl's legs. And her mother was right near her, and she was crying and bleeding there. And then we couldn't help her. And she died there in her mother's arms. And it was very horrible things. People were dying in the train. Every day they would throw off, just on the side road, a few dead people. At one point,
Excuse me for 1 second.
We got 30.
Okay, go ahead.
at one point they lined us up, and we had to sit on the ground. They took us off the train, and we were surrounded by guns. And some of the people said they are going to shoot us now. We felt, I mean, what can happen? Anything, it can't be any worse dead than what we had alive. So we just stayed there, and somehow or other a messenger came or something, but their guns disappeared, and we were alive still. They got us on another train, and they took us to Edelheim. I don't remember the name. It was a lager, a concentration camp, not far from Berlin. It was not a big place, and we stayed there for about a week. We got a little food there, some soup and some bread. Not too much, but it brought us a little back to life.
How long do you think you were on this train for before you arrived?
About 2 weeks. Yeah. Also, we stopped in another place where they were making munitions underground, and we met a lot of girls who we knew from before, and they told us that they worked underground with munitions. And when we met them, we stayed there also about a week. They were very sick. They were sitting there outside, and they were very sick. And we talked to them. They told us that they were working underground and doing ammunition. They actually brought us there, that they had replaced them with us. But as I said, the war was drawing to an end, and they didn't leave us there. They brought us, that was before Edelheim.
Do you remember the name of that place?
Something with a B, Baden something. I gave the name when they interviewed me, you know, when I came, but I can't remember. I had it written down someplace. It was something Baden something. It was a munition factory underground. And after that, Edelheim, and from Edelheim, they came one day for transport. That was already in April, like the last week of April. And they came and they told us that we are going to go on transport. And there was some little pieces of blankets that we got. And as I said, we were always very cold, and we couldn't to put on a blanket outside the clothes. So we used to do it, put a blanket under the clothes because we were so skinny that it didn't show. And when she lined us up, the Stubova to transport, she says, everybody throw down your blankets. And somebody said in the front, but we are cold, we are very, very cold, and where we are going, we will be cold. So she says, die wirst haben, I can't remember what, you will have the sky will cover you, in German. Anyway, we got on the trains, and they took us to Hamburg. Hamburg was not a concentration camp. I don't know what it was. There was like a lot of rooms, and we were only sitting on the floor, but it's like everybody was going on transport someplace. And they told us that we are going on transport. Nobody told us that we are getting liberated or anything. It was about the 29th or the 30th of April by the time, actually the 29th, because it took us more than a day to get to Denmark. And on the train already we saw soldiers with Red Cross armbands. And the trains were still cattle trains, but there was straw on the bottom, clean straw, and we couldn't believe it. We actually getting clean straw to sit on. And we got on the trains, and we were all very sick. By that time, I could hardly walk. I had an infection on my leg, which was boils like this, and red stripes were going down. When I arrived to Denmark, they took us like this. The Danish Red Cross were carrying us into the rooms where they set up for us. And I told them that it hurts very badly, and somebody cleaned it. And they put on paper bandages because they didn't have anything there either. But they actually gave us oatmeal to eat, with milk. That was the first we saw milk in more than a year. And oatmeal was something really extraordinary. And when they opened the door, we saw flowers, and we saw trees blooming. And it was something so wonderful. We thought that we finally got to heaven. Just to see something nice, not those walls of the concentration camps. As I said, we got food, but what happened is that as soon as they started giving us food, we started running to the toilet. We couldn't. So there was lines and lines to the toilet. They didn't have enough toilets for us because we couldn't accept any food. Our bodies were not ready for it. We were already all shrunk up. Then they put us on a, that was the 1st of May when we arrived to Denmark. And they put us on a boat. We went to Copenhagen. Or maybe the boat was after Copenhagen to Malmö. I'm not sure. Do you have to take a boat to, we were in Denmark. I think that we went to Copenhagen, and from Copenhagen we got a boat to Malmö. And in Malmö there was a Red Cross group, and they undressed us. They took everything off. They put it in bags and they burned it. And we were taken in through bathtubs. Big group of people. And they actually scrubbed us with brushes and with soap, delousing us also with some kind of powders. We were so dirty that our skin was black. We didn't have water for a bath for months. months. We didn't have enough water to drink. We never washed our teeth until we came to Sweden. All of us had bleeding mouths because our teeth were almost coming out. There they dressed us all in new clothes, and they took us to Landskrona, where they put us in quarantine because there was an awful lot of sick between us. And right away we got taken care of. They did operations on my, cutting open, and we got antibiotics or something because it was getting better. The doctor there said that I would have had about 24 to 48 hours because it was all infected. I would have got blood poisoning from this infection. And there they gave us vitamins every breakfast as we went along, and we were very lucky because the food, they selected the food that they gave us. They knew that we are not able to eat anything heavy, and they gave us the food very light, and they gave us vitamins. And we were so in a habit to save everything that we actually used to put away a piece of bread under our pillow, even there. And you heard chewing all night, because we were always afraid that we are not going to get any more. So you would hear people chewing all night. And again, the toilets were never enough. We were always in lines and lines of toilets, running. And of course, we were quite sick. When they weighed me in, I weighed 33 kilos. That is like a half a pound. 2 pounds is a kilo. And the nurses who bathed us, some of them came along with us. And a few weeks later, they didn't recognize us. They said it couldn't be. That just couldn't be the same girls. We thought it's some black people here because we were black from dirt. And suddenly, they thought that we are very old. And suddenly they saw very nice-looking young girls. I mean, most of us looked pretty good. And after Landskrona, of course, we started looking for families. And the Red Cross had lists. They started having lists of people. And the Swedish people would throw food, even though whatever we got, they would throw presents to us. And they would adopt some girls. Those who could go already out would get food, special food, and they would invite us for a supper, and they would give us some clothes, some presents. Because we got clothes, but it wasn't a lot, We just got some stuff. And after that, we went to Reftele. And after Reftele was Göteborg. And from Göteborg, we got papers. Somebody helped me to get in touch with my brother in Chicago. And we got papers to come to America. And I think that we were the first ones to go to the Czech consul to get papers. And we were on the first boat from Sweden to America.
When did you come to America?
We arrived in 46 in March. We were lucky that we had somebody, because we actually had nothing, no money or anything. A lot of people went home, but by that time I had realized that nobody is really alive in the family. Because as I talked to people, I found out that this sister went on this transport, that brother went on this transport. And we started looking at Red Cross papers, and there was no names on it. I sent telegrams to my hometown to some of the neighbors who were non-Jewish, and that's how my brother, who survived, Joseph, found out. That was 6 months later that we are alive. And he ran because the Russians started occupying that part of the Czechoslovakia, and he went without any passport or anything. Through the night, they knew the territory, and they smuggled themselves out, and he went to Prague. And from there, he sent us a telegram. I should have really brought along that telegram when we first got it in Sweden. We all, the group that we survived together, got very close. And then we used to mourn and cry together for our family. And when I found out that my brother is alive, it was at night. They called on the telephone, you have a telegram, that was a small town, Reftala, and you have to come for it. We were all in nightgowns and night robes, and you would have seen 60 or 80 girls running to the post office just to get that telegram. And then, of course, we realized that my brother was alive, and there was some cousins there too. And we wrote to him, and then he was giving us information. He was very sick, and he was in a German hospital for months, and that's why he couldn't get in touch with us. He almost died. He was a big man, and he was 75 kilos when they 75. He was under 100 pounds. That was less, maybe 80, maybe 40 kilos when they found him. He was very sick, and then he went to Sredna. He didn't find anybody. That's how I found out that nobody is survived. From the whole town of Sredna, there's a handful of people, and there was a lot of families with children that survived. I know that from the rabbi's family, there was nobody left. There was about 8 or 10 children there. And there was other families, our neighbors, who also, they had a lot of people. Nobody survived. I used to scan the Red Cross papers. I used to go around looking, because I thought maybe by some chance some of the children. I found about 3 women who I went to school with in Israel. I found a few girls here in New York. But the survivors from the whole town were maybe 10, 12 people. It was a very, very bad situation with the Hungarian Jews, because that was the last transport, and they were hurrying to get rid of them. And Eichmann really knew how to do a job on them. One of my brother-in-law was in Budapest. He was hiding out there. And that was already in January of 45. And they lined up people, and they shot them near the Danube. One of my cousins was there, and he says that the Danube was running red, and the bodies on top. That is a very big river, the Danube. And that it was running red with blood and with bodies floating on the water. That they tried to catch everyone they just could. And they killed them there the last minute. The Hungarians were not that kind either. There was that Hackenkreuz there too, and they had people who were ready to help them. The Polish also. The Polish heard and saw everything. Very few people. I mean, they say was some Gentiles who helped. Yes, but very far and in between. Very far and in between. Nobody was willing to help the Jews.
When Okay, we have about 5 minutes.
Yes.
You arrived in the United States with your two nieces.
With my
to
two
your
nieces.
brother.
We came to New York, and from there, I have had cousins and uncles and aunt who were here for many years. And we were here about 5 days, and after that we went to Chicago. And we stayed there for about 6 months, but we did not like Chicago. My brother had 7 children, and he didn't have really a lot of room for us. We started working, and I really didn't like Chicago at all. And when my brother arrived from Prague, that was about in September of that same year of '46, we came to New York, and we went to Rockaway. That's where we could find rooms, because that was summer houses.
Mhm.
So we found a room there, and we settled down. And my niece was the first one to get married. She got married in December after we came. That was in '46. And I got married in March '47, the 2nd of March. That's 45 years ago. And my husband was here before the war. He knew my father. He came from the same vicinity, but I didn't know him. And once he heard that the family, so he came after me, and we got married. And a year later, I had my first son, and 3 years later, my second son, and then 8 years later, my third son. And they are all educated. We did very hard. We worked very hard, both of us, but we made sure that the children get a very good education, and they are doctors.
All three?
Yeah. And they have very nice families. My oldest son lives in Baltimore. He has two children. My second son lives in Oceanside. He has 5 children. And my youngest son lives in Queens. He has 4 children. So we have a nice family now.
Tell me the names of your mother and father. I didn't ask before.
My mother's name was Nedi Jakubowicz, and my father's name was Abraham Hershkovitz. You have the pictures there. My mother's picture when she was a young girl, and my father when he was being operated on, and he was in Bratislava, which was in Czechoslovakia, and he sent us a picture. And it seems he sent a picture to my brother, and that's how we got it, because we were not able to save any papers or documents. When my brother went home, Joseph, who was in Serena, the house was not burned down, but broken down. They stole everything. There was nothing there. And my brother's house also, people were living there, and we couldn't get anything out of there. My sister's house was also occupied. It was people who occupied, took everything. We couldn't, he couldn't. I didn't want to go home. I mean, I could have gone home too, but I felt that would like break the camel's back. That would be the last straw, to see the houses empty without my family. And I didn't think I can face that anymore. So I never went home. I went straight to America, as I said, and I tried here to inquire, and went to every meeting, anything that I could think of to find out. But I was very positive that they died. I met people who were with my brother Herman and my youngest brother Yitzchak. He was still healthy, and they say that he was carrying Herman. Herschel, who was very sick already, and he picked him up, and he was carrying him on his shoulder, and an SS man shot him and told him, "You throw him down." And he did. And a few days later, and this was already, they were being liberated. The Americans were in the front of the lager. I don't know exactly the name of the place, but the guy was with him, was from Serena. And he said that they took 50 people out to the back, and they were shooting at them. And in the front, they were already liberating. It was so much on their heart that they had to get rid of everybody, that even then they were still ready to kill the people who were surviving. And my brother was between them. He survived till the last day. He was a healthy-looking young man, very good-looking. And they killed him the last day on the Liberation Day. It was very painful. In the beginning, I used to have nightmares every night. My husband lost his whole family too, because he came out. He thought that he's going to bring his family out, but he never had a chance. And he felt my pain, and he used to, many times, he was working all day, and I would cry at night. I would wake up that the dogs are chasing me, or SS, and I was running, or I saw the fires, and I would wake up in a sweat and crying, screaming, and he was always there to comfort me and help me to get over the time. Even now, this is already 46, 47 years, 47, 44, that would be 48 years. I still have nightmares. I still wake up. I'm not saying that every night like I used to, but once in a while I'm still being chased. I'm still running. I still wake up in a sweat and crying. My pillow is all wet. And I say, wasn't it enough? Are they taking me again? And I would be crying. What is that going on that I'm still having to go to concentration camp? I don't think that anybody who was there could ever forget these experiences. It was nothing that, it was like unbelievable dread, dreadful, dread. The whole thing was unbelievable. Even now when you think of it, how could they have done that? How is that possible that they were burning? I saw them throwing in people into those, because they didn't have enough room to burn them in the crematoriums, and they had those big ditches, and they were burning them. And I can't believe that people could ever. It was unbelievable. Then my cousin, who was standing, she said, "It's not possible. These are dead bodies that we came, people died on the way, they are throwing them in." I read later that it was really people who they killed, or children they didn't even kill, and they threw them into the fire. I read it after. And people who worked there. I have, just this weekend I met a woman who worked in Brezhinka. That's where the places were the gas chambers, and she says she saw them. She saw things happening. I just saw it from far. I was not close enough. We were in that camp. We just saw things that we saw, I saw the gypsies arriving, and they were throwing them into big trucks on top of each other. I saw, because we were near the train station, and as I said, I could see very well. I had very good eyes. I saw people coming in from Bratislava, from Slovakia, older people. And they were taking them off the trains and throwing them on top of each other into those trucks. And I was standing there near the building. I was hiding with the building. And I thought to myself, am I seeing right? Are these people alive? But I saw that they're moving. They were throwing them on top of each other and in the trucks. And as the trucks filled up, they took another truck. And those Ukraine and Polish men were throwing these people right into those trucks on top of each other. So we saw a lot of dreadful things. We saw the people arriving and marching.
We're going to have to conclude.
Okay.
We're coming to the end of our time. I want to thank you very much. I know it was very, very difficult to come in and go back through the memories.
I felt that people should know. There are already people who are denying that it happened. We feel that those who are still alive and still have the memories of it should speak up, that to refute those who are denying that it happened. I felt very strongly about that. I couldn't talk about it. When we were in Washington, they wanted to interview me, and I just couldn't talk about it, but I felt now that I have to. I have to, because I see in the papers when they started feuding and people saying that it couldn't have happened. There was one professor from Vienna who came out that there was not enough physical ability. It seems that they managed very well. I talked to people who were working in the gas chambers and how they pulled out the people from the chambers. They had to use forks because they were all like cut up with each other because they were so pushed in so tightly. And somebody who told me that they found live babies because they were underneath the bodies. Of course, they didn't leave them be alive.
Okay.
So it is true.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate you coming in.
We want to do the best we can.